leave early or want to review it later, I will be sending out a link to the recording to the YouTube. Um, oh, and I see some sneezeweed, milkweed, yarrow. What's your favorite plant, Dave? Do you have one?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I love common milkweed. Um, and I love heartleaf aster. I've got a lot of favorites.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha. Well, thank you for sharing. All right, so welcome everyone to Chagrin River Watershed Partners Speaker Series presentation with Dave Tomashefski. Did I say that right, Dave?
Yeah,
Or
that was
about
great.
right? Okay, thank you. He's the education specialist with Meadow City Native Plant Nursery, and today he will be presenting Pollinator Town and discussing how to support the much-loved pollinators by creating small-scale habitats and nesting sites at your home garden. Prior to Meadow City, Dave worked at the Soil, Water, and Environmental Lab at Ohio State, where he also earned his master's degree. And before I hand it over to Dave, my name is Maggie. I'm an AmeriCorps member serving with Chagrin River Watershed Partners. And here's just some quick background on this speaker series, CRWP, and the Chagrin River Watershed in general. Let's see here. Okay, so CRWP hosts these webinars by partnering with environmental professionals like Dave to engage and educate and other interested professionals and members of the community about environmental protection. Let me go. Can you see that next slide okay?
Hmm.
Yeah, okay, great, thanks. So some quick background. The Chagrin River watershed is a high-quality watershed neighboring the Cuyahoga River watershed. And this high-quality title, it comes from the Chagrin River having over 71 miles that are designated as scenic, as well as having cold water streams and supporting a population of Ohio brook trout. However, it is still impacted by development activities, which increase flooding, erosion, and water quality problems. Over 20 years ago, in 1996, 16 communities came together to form the Chagrin River Watershed Partners to pool knowledge and resources and cost effectively keep the watershed healthy as communities grow. Today, the partners' 35 members represent over 91% of the watershed in Cuyahoga, Geauga, Lake and Portage counties. All right, here you can see a list of CRWP's current member communities. Chagrin River Watershed Partners is supported by member dues, grants, and donations. We provide technical assistance on land use planning to minimize flooding, erosion, and water quality issues. And we focus on cost-effective solutions for communities and landowners. We also co-lead the Central Lake Erie Basin Collaborative, a regional partnership for healthy watersheds. Through this network, we provide technical support for watershed organizations all across Northeast Ohio. All right, final slide for me. Here's a summary of CRWP's wide variety of work. Our watershed scale work benefits all of our members and includes watershed planning, research, plus developing and updating model watershed protection codes. In addition to watershed scale work, CRWP collaborates with members on grant writing, helps communities adopt and implement codes, provides recommendations for development plans, supports compliance with stormwater requirements, and educates and empowers people to steward watersheds and tackle erosion and stormwater challenges. Most of our work with our members is supported through grants and service agreements, like I mentioned, secured by CRWP or with CRWP's assistance, or contracts with members. We're thankful to those that support our work and ability to protect Northeast Ohio's waterways. But today you are here for Pollinator Town, so I appreciate you bearing with me. Healthy watersheds support healthy pollinator populations and much more. And CRWP is a big advocate for planting native to mitigate erosion and flooding issues, um, as well as for filtering stormwater and supporting beneficial wildlife and pollinators. We are grateful, super grateful to Dave and his team at Meadow City for all the awesome work they're doing and for partnering with us through the speaker series and other ways like through our Master Rain Gardener program. If you do have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat as we go, or you can save them for the end. That's when we'll do the Q&A. But with that, thank you very much, Dave, and everyone else who's interested in the topic. And you can go ahead and share your screen and get started.
Okie doke. Okay, can everybody see my screen then? Okay, good. And if I, oh, wait a second here. Now when I try to advance the slide, okay, now did the slide change?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, perfect. All right. So thanks very much, Maggie, for that nice introduction about your organization. And yeah, my name's Dave from Meadow City Nursery, and I'd like to welcome everybody to Pollinator Town. And what we're going to be doing in this presentation is thinking about our gardens as places of shelter and nesting habitat for bees, butterflies, moths, and lots of other pollinators and beneficial insects. So we know that our gardens provide food for these organisms in the form of pollen and nectar from our flowers. As you can see here with this beautiful green metallic sweat bee, which is foraging on New England aster. But now we're actually thinking about giving these organisms a place to live in our gardens. So what does that mean? It means providing some bare soil for ground nesting bees like the unequal cellophane bee. We actually saw these at the nursery just this past spring. It means providing leaf litter so that butterflies like the summer azure have a place to conceal their chrysalis. It means providing some old wood like a log so that uh, moths like the grapevine epimenis have a place to form their cocoon. And when we provide shelter and nesting sites in our gardens, we're really maximizing our garden's habitat value. And the reason that I say that is because, or one reason I say that is because lots of pollinators have very short foraging ranges. So this means the distance that they're traveling from their nest to the flowers where they're collecting pollen and nectar. So 90% of our bees, like this mason bee pictured here, they actually do their foraging within just 450 feet of their nest. So if we are providing shelter and nesting sites in our gardens, that's essentially like putting food at the doorstep of these pollinators. And that's where it's going to serve them best because they're not flying very far to find those foraging resources. And also, creating shelter and nesting sites in our gardens makes them more active, interesting places for us, the gardener. There's a lot more to see, such as, this scene right in front of us with a gray hair streak butterfly and a bee coming in for a landing at this mountain mint. Older established gardens that have pollinators nesting in the garden will have 3 or 4 times as much pollinator activity at the flowers as do newer gardens. So that's certainly a benefit. Also, we need to recognize that now is a critical time to help our pollinators. Just since the mid 1990s in Ohio, there's been a 33% decrease in butterfly abundance. So that's 1 out of every 3 butterflies gone. Um, there are about 50 species of bumblebees in North America, and right now, 26% of them are threatened with extinction. There are bumblebees like the rusty-patched bumblebee. 20 years ago, this was a common species in Ohio, but now it's virtually extirpated from the state. It's experienced steep declines. So when we help, pollinators and other insects like this, we're not only helping those species, but we're helping organisms higher up in the food chain. And this is a great example right here. This is a common nighthawk. Since 1970, these birds have declined by 58% throughout North America. And I don't know if you've ever watched common nighthawks before, but they're just so fun to watch. You'll almost lose your balance staring up at the sky, looking at these birds fly around, chasing moths and other flying bugs. But it's the decline in that prey, those aerial insects, that is in part leading to declines in birds like this. So it's more important than ever that we're, creating this habitat in our gardens for these insects. So what does this habitat look like? Well, let's take a trip through Pollinator Town and see what it looks like. And, just for fun, each of the habitat sites in Pollinator Town kind of are named after, I don't know, like little neighborhoods. So first off is Leafy Lane. And Leafy Lane, it's just an area of fallen leaves in your garden. So, oftentimes we will use shredded wood mulch to cover the ground surface in our gardens. And there's nothing wrong with wood mulch. It's very useful for getting a garden started. What it does is it can act as a very good smothering material for suppressing the growth of plants that would be competing with our flowers that we're planting. And it also can prevent the growth of weeds, and it helps retain soil moisture. But I would say that as your wood mulch starts to break down, don't replace it with more wood mulch. Rather, replace it with fallen leaves. And this is because those fallen leaves provide shelter to a huge number of beneficial insects and other organisms. So, who needs fallen leaves? A lot of insects need fallen leaves. We're talking about lacewings, hoverflies, moths, butterflies, lightning bugs. The list goes on and on. Um, Lots of caterpillars. They will form their cocoon in the shelter of the leaves, and those leaves provide concealment to those cocoons. So what we see here is the chrysalis of an eastern tiger swallowtail, a very beautiful common butterfly, and you can see how that chrysalis is designed to fit in perfectly with that fallen leaf layer. Lots of butterflies and moths will actually spend the winter among those fallen leaves, but they'll do this at different points in their life cycle depending on the species. So, for instance, this green cloverworm moth on the left, that will overwinter in its adult form. And then this hackberry emperor butterfly on the right, that will overwinter as a caterpillar. And what we have here is a classic example of a moth caterpillar making use of those fallen leaves during the wintertime. This is the woolly bear. It's probably North America's most famous caterpillar. You've probably seen it in the fall. You'll see it kind of scurrying across sidewalks. And what it's doing is it's looking for an area of fallen leaves so it can climb in there, curl up, and hibernate. The woolly bear actually has some fascinating adaptations to surviving the winter cold. Um, Within its tissues, it's able to expel water out of its cells to the space between the cells so that when that water freezes and expands, its cells don't rupture. This means that the woolly bear can be frozen solid and then thawed out, and it'll be perfectly fine. However, the fewer temperature fluctuations that the woolly bear experiences, the healthier it's going to be. So that leaf layer that the woolly bear is hibernating under, that actually insulates the caterpillar, and it minimizes the temperature fluctuation, and it makes its survival rate higher. Now, when the woolly bear undergoes its metamorphosis, it becomes the Isabella tiger moth. This is a beautiful moth, and this is likely to visit the flowers in your garden at night. At night, it's like your garden has another life. And moths like the Isabella tiger moth will be visiting flowers, especially milkweeds. This moth loves milkweeds. All right, so the next stop in Pollinator Town is fallen timbers. And fallen timbers just consists of one or more pieces of decaying wood, like an old log. And who lives in fallen timbers? Beetles and bees. And two species that I'm going to specifically highlight are the Betsy beetle and the pure green sweat bee. Okay, so 30% of our bee species nest in cavities above ground, and oftentimes they're nesting in old insect burrows in dead wood. One of the bees that nests this way is the pure green sweat bee. This is one of our most beautiful bees. It's this shiny green metallic bee, and it's also one of the most important pollinators of our forests. Some studies show that the pure green sweat bee will do 90% of the pollination in a given tract of forest. But it will frequently fly out of the forest and it will visit our yards and gardens. When it does that, it pollinates a wide number of flowers, such as this golden Alexander shown on your screen here. And when the pure green sweat bee is looking for a place to nest, it's specifically looking for a log in a shady, moist location. It will enter that log through a pre-existing beetle burrow, and it will enlarge that burrow and create chambers that its developing larvae will then occupy. And this is just a simple diagram here of what that nest would look like inside of that log. Now, you may be thinking, oh, come on, what are the chances that the pure green sweat bee is going to nest in a log in my yard? And well, I'll tell you, just last summer, I was visiting some friends in Cleveland Heights, and they had this old decaying log next to their patio. And I took a close look at it, and sure enough, there was the pure green sweat bee flying in and out of its nest in the log. And this is just a close-up photo of it. And the yard adjacent to this patio, it's like basically just like a shade garden with lots of nice native flowers. But that, it's just a testament to the fact that they put this, habitat feature in their yard, and then it served a really important purpose for this bee. So one of the insects that creates the burrows that the pure green sweat bee occupies is the Betsy beetle. And the Betsy beetle, it's common throughout Eastern North America. It's also more of a forest species, but it will visit yards, especially if those yards are near a woodland. So the Betsy beetle, it has a very important role in the carbon cycle in our ecosystems. It will tunnel into fallen wood like logs, and it makes its nests. And as it's doing that, it's breaking up those large wood fragments into smaller pieces, which then can decompose through microbial action. But this beetle, now, first of all, I should say, it's a little bit frightening looking. These things are big, like they can get an inch and a half in size. But the Betsy beetle is totally docile. People even have them as pets sometimes. So anyway, what's cool about this beetle is it actually has a very kind of advanced family unit that it lives in. The older beetles and the older offspring, they actually all work together to raise the younger offspring and to raise the larvae. And as they're doing this, they produce these like little squeaks. And these are audible to the human ear. So like you can find videos on YouTube of this beetle squeaking and you can hear it. And what's amazing is that the different squeaks have different meanings to the beetle. So like it'll have like an alarm squeak or a defense against the predator squeak, or squeaks for different ways to manage the offspring. And this has been called the most elaborate system of sound communication known for any insect. So it's just extraordinary that this common insect, that we could give a home to in our gardens, has this kind of behavior. All right, the next stop in Pollinator Town is Stem Hollow. And this just refers to the nesting habitat of stem nesting bees. So as I said, 30% of our bee species nest in cavities above ground. Lots of these bees are going to be nesting in hollow or pithy plant stems. So this would include groups of bees like the yellow-faced bees or the small carpenter bees, the mason bees, and the leafcutter bees. Not surprisingly, the small bees, they can nest in narrow stems, and the larger bees, like the leafcutter bees, they like wider diameter stems. Cup plant, for instance, is a large native flower whose stems will often be occupied by leafcutter bees. Now, if you want to create nesting sites for these stem nesting bees, what you want to do is after your flowers die back at the end of the growing season, you want to cut those dead stems to about 8 to 24 inches in height. And those freshly cut stems, that is exactly what these bees are targeting when they're trying to find a spot to nest. Now, the ideal timing for this is going to be in the springtime. You want to leave those dead stems standing throughout the winter because that provides shelter to birds and other organisms. But then in early spring, like now is a perfectly fine time, you want to cut at least some of those stems to about 1 to 2 feet in height. Because now is the time of year when our bees are going to start emerging. When you are working in your garden, though, this time of year, it's very important that you don't go, plodding all through your garden space because, as we've seen, there are organisms that are, quite possibly hibernating in the leaf litter still, and they're not going to be, active for a while. So I would say just trim the stems that you can access from the perimeter of your garden or from stepping stones that are within your garden. And that's a great reason to have stepping stones in your garden. There's a pollinator expert. Her name is Heather Holm, and she has all kinds of great information about pollinators and gardening. And she gets questions all the time. When is the right time in spring for me to clean up my garden? And she says her answer is don't clean up your garden. There's no time throughout the growing season when organisms aren't using these different shelter and nesting sites. So you really want to try to minimize impacts to your garden as much as possible. And working from the perimeter and stepping stones is a great way to do it. Now, the portion of the stem that you cut off, you can just leave that laying on the ground. That'll contribute to the fallen leaves as like a natural mulch. Oh, and the other thing is, you just want to cut last year's stems. You don't want to keep cutting the same stem year after year because once these are cut one time, then they could be housing those stem nesting bees. Okay, one stem nesting bee that I'd like to draw attention to especially is the small carpenter bee. These are a really common bee, and they pollinate a lot of different flowers. They especially like to occupy the old stems of wild bergamot. And these bees have a fascinating life history. I'm going to share part of that with you now. It's called The Tale of the Dwarf Eldest Daughter. Okay, so just like other stem nesting bees, the mother small carpenter bee, she hollows out a dead plant stem and she creates a series of cells for her larvae to mature. And you can see that in this stem down at the bottom of your screen. Now, in the very first cell, she always lays a fertilized egg. And that means that it's going to mature into a female bee. Also in that first cell, she puts less pollen and nectar than she does in the other cells. So that means that daughter bee, as she's maturing, she's going to turn out significantly smaller than her siblings. She's going to be a dwarf bee. And actually, you can see her here pictured next to her normal-sized mother. So once that little bee has finished the pollen and nectar that her mother left for her, she's in a tough spot because she's got nothing else to eat, so she needs to get out of the stem. But between her and the end of the stem, all of her siblings are in different stages of their larval development. So what that little bee does is she very carefully pushes her way through each of the partitions separating her from her siblings, and she patches those partitions back up as she goes. She also is very careful not to disturb her siblings that are in their various stages of development. Now, when that little bee gets to the end of the stem, she finds her mother waiting for her. And at that point, the mom says to the daughter, honey, I need you to go run some errands for me. And what she does is she sends that dwarf daughter bee out to collect more pollen and nectar to bring back to the stem so that the whole family can make it through the winter. And then they'll all emerge the following year. So the dwarf eldest daughter is like the hero of this tale, kind of like a Cinderella story. And she's the spirit animal for anyone who feels like there was some, there's some sibling favoritism growing up. Okay, the next stop in Pollinator Town is Club Mud. And Club Mud is just a patch of muddy soil in your garden. And this is especially useful to mud dauber wasps and butterflies. So I'll start out by talking about the mud daubers. Mud daubers are a really handsome black and yellow wasp, and they build their nests of mud. And these nests will oftentimes be on like the side of a house or the side of a shed underneath an overhang. And at first, the nest just looks like a big clump of mud. But after the young wasps emerge, it'll have a series of exit holes in it. Now, wasps are very similar to bees. They're closely related. But whereas bees get their protein from pollen, wasps get their protein from their insect prey. And the prey that the mud dauber is targeting is spiders. So the mud dauber catches spiders, it paralyzes them, and it puts them in its nest. Then it lays its eggs. This is the mother mud dauber I'm talking about. She'll lay her eggs and then she seals up the nest and she leaves. She doesn't stick around to defend the nest. Once those eggs hatch and the larvae consume the spiders, they are mature wasps and they exit the nest, leaving these exit holes. Those exit holes, so now the nest is empty, but those exit holes are just like a series of cylinders. That is the perfect environment for the nesting of cavity nesting bees like mason bees and leafcutter bees. So these old mud dauber nests become home to these bees, which clearly have a lot of ecosystem value. But the mud daubers, they have their own value too, in addition to just creating this nest. Like all wasps, they're pollinators. They visit flowers for nectar, and when they're doing that, they transfer pollen from flower to flower. Wasps especially like white flowers. If you want to help mud daubers, one great flower is common boneset. It's a white flower, it smells great, and it also will do very well in a wet soil if you happen to have wet soil in your yard. I'll also say that mud daubers are totally non-aggressive. We have to water plants constantly at the nursery. So we have some areas of the nursery that are pretty muddy. We had mud daubers all over the place. And we would always be walking past the mud daubers, dragging our hoses past the mud daubers. These wasps couldn't care less. So they're really they're a very good neighbor, is what I would say. Okay, so the patch of mud is also very useful to butterflies. Butterflies will sip mud to rehydrate and also to obtain important minerals in their diet. This is especially true of the male butterflies. When the male butterflies, when they mate, they get depleted of sodium. And the way that they replenish that sodium is through sipping mud. Butterflies, and let's see here. When they congregate at a patch of mud like this, it's called a puddle party or a puddle club. And the butterflies that will most frequently do this, they're the swallowtails, the pearl crescents, and also the sulfur butterflies, the yellow ones. But anyway, if you want to create a puddling station for butterflies in your yard, and this would also be a useful resource for the mud daubers, here's what you do. Get a shallow dish that's at least a foot in diameter. Fill it with soil or sand. The soil is going to be more useful to the mud daubers. Mix in a few tablespoons of composted manure. You can find this at the hardware store. And then just saturate it with water. You don't necessarily want standing water, but you just want it to be thoroughly wet. And then you place that in a sunny location, and that'll provide nutrients to these puddling butterflies, and it could also be a source of mud for your mud daubers. Okay, the next stop in Pollinator Town is Beetle Rock, and Beetle Rock is named after ground beetles. So ground beetles are not pollinators, but they are very useful to have in your garden because they are predators of some notorious garden pests, such as aphids, snails, and slugs. So these organisms will deplete the vigor of our plants, and ground beetles will help keep their populations in check. The ground beetle, it's mostly hunting at night, but during the daytime, it retreats underneath rocks. That's where it finds the nice, cool, moist environment that it likes. So, if you put some large rocks in your garden, not only is it going to be a very nice aesthetic feature, but it also can provide important shelter for these ground beetles. And pictured here is the big-headed ground beetle. This is a common ground beetle in Ohio. It's about 3/4 of an inch long, and it has big pinchers on its front end. And, that's a frightening prospect. But I will say that you do not need to fear the big-headed ground beetle. If you were to encounter one, it would simply scurry away. And they are definitely allies in the garden. Now, rather than just having a few large rocks, if you loosely stack smaller rocks, you get another habitat benefit. In addition to providing shelter to ground beetles at the ground surface, you could be providing nesting sites to leafcutter bees. Leafcutter bees love to nest in the cracks and crevices among stacked rocks. And leafcutter bees are really cool. They are like the artisans of the bee world. The nesting cells in between their larval chambers are crafted from segments of leaf that the leafcutter bee, cuts out and then shapes, within its nest. So really an interesting organism that you could attract with these loosely stacked rocks. Okay, the next stop in Pollinator Town is Bumble Tunnel. And this is named after bumblebees. And the reason that I like to focus on bumblebees is, first of all, bumblebees are fascinating. They are North America's most social native bees. So the vast majority of bees lead a solitary lifestyle, which means that the mother bee constructs the nest and she's not really collaborating with any other bees. But bumblebees are different because they're highly social. So the mother bee, the queen, she will actually cooperate with her offspring to raise additional offspring and to care for the nest. And everybody has their assigned role. So the queen, she's going to be laying eggs and covering them with a protective layer of wax. Her daughters, the workers, they are going to be incubating those eggs, and they're also going to be foraging for pollen and nectar to feed the developing larvae. What do the sons do? The sons have a job too, but really their only job is to mate with the next year's queen from another nest. But what we see with the bumblebee is this very cool division of labor, which I think is neat. Bumblebees are also like super pollinators. They have a number of physiological and physical adaptations that enhance their value as pollinators. For one thing, bumblebees can warm their bodies better than other bees can. They can vibrate their flight muscles to generate some internal warmth. This means that bumblebees can be active in cooler temperatures than other bees. Up in the top right corner of your screen, there's a bumblebee on frost aster. Frost aster is a common aster. It sometimes blooms into November. And even at that time, you will have bumblebees visiting that flower. Okay, so when it comes to the nesting habitat of bumblebees, they are occupying cavities both above and below ground. Probably the most common nesting site for bumblebees is going to be an old rodent burrow, like an old vole hole or an old mouse hole. And but bumblebees will also nest underneath the thatch layer that develops at the base of our grasses. So, oh, just one second. So as grasses grow, their old stems accumulate near the ground, and they form this layer called thatch. This thatch can serve as a protective boundary against predators and inclement weather for an organism like the bumblebee. And underneath that thatch, there's ample space for the bumblebee to form its nest. So, what I would recommend if you want to help create nesting habitat for bumblebees, I would say plant a native grass. A good one is little blue stem. The reason I recommend little blue stem is because it has great seasonal color, and also it's known not to outcompete your flowers. It forms these loose colonies, so there's plenty of space for flowers to grow in between. The other thing I would recommend is go easy on the chipmunks. Some people they think chipmunks are bad, like it's gonna, I don't know, make their house fall into a gaping hole in the earth or something. And I know Martha Stewart has dissed chipmunks in the past, but according to the Humane Society of the USA, there are no documented cases of a chipmunk burrow causing structural damage to a house, a porch, or any other. Appreciate the fact that these guys are there, because their old burrows will oftentimes house nesting bumblebees. Okay, so this is the second last stop in Pollinator Town, and this is the flats. And the flats just refers to the nesting habitat of ground nesting bees. 70% of our bees actually nest underground. And when they're looking for a spot to nest, they're looking for a patch of bare soil, especially in a sunny place. So this is what you could offer to them. I know that most of your ground surface is going to be covered with fallen leaves, but maybe save a small section of it that's left bare, because that will be perfect for these ground nesting bees. One of the bees that you can likely attract is the very smooth sweat bee. This is a little bee, and it's active all through the summertime. It visits a lot of different flowers, but it especially likes milkweeds. And what's interesting about this bee is it nests in dense aggregations. So you could have as many as 100 very smooth sweat bee nests just within a square yard of soil. And, what an honor it would be as a gardener to have a nest aggregation like that in your garden. I think you would be the envy of the whole block if they knew about this bee. Another bee that is common in urban and suburban environments that nests in the ground is Dunning's mining bee. So Dunning's mining bee is also going to nest in aggregations with multiple nests in a right next to each other. This bee is just active in the springtime, and its favorite flowers are flowering trees and shrubs, such as the hawthorn pictured in the top right part of your screen. Okay, the final stop in Pollinator Town is Brushfoot Lodge. And this is just a brush pile, but brush piles are one of the absolute best habitat features you could have in your garden. They provide shelter and nesting habitat to a huge number of pollinators and other insects. I call it Brushfoot Lodge after the brushfoot family of butterflies. This is the largest butterfly family, and two butterflies in that family are what I call the grammatical species. These are the eastern comma and the question mark. When the underside of their wings looks just like a dead leaf. It's unreal the way it mimics that. And then when they open their wings, it's stunning, as you can see, just really jaw-dropping, pretty. And we've seen question marks at the nursery, so I know they're around. These butterflies, they will spend the winter in their adult form, and oftentimes they will overwinter under loose bark, like on trees, but they also will overwinter in brush piles. So that's a really nice benefit of having a brush pile. Also, since your brush pile is home to so many different insects, it's a great foraging habitat for ground foraging birds. And these would include birds like the Carolina wren and the white-throated sparrow. These are both birds that you could expect to see in your yard if you have good habitat for them. And I should add, they're both great singers. The Carolina wren, it's got this really clear ringing call, and the white-throated sparrow, it's almost like a sorrowful phrase that it sings. It's really beautiful. But these birds will also seek out shelter in your brush pile during inclement weather. Believe it or not, there are instructions for building a brush pile. And what you want to do is you put your larger limbs near the base, and then you stack smaller limbs on top, and you don't want to pack it too densely. You want to make sure there are lots of openings that are greater than 6 inches wide so those birds and butterflies can get in there. Okay, so this just shows all of the different habitat features in Pollinator Town. And okay, and I'm just going to give you, I promised Maggie that I would highlight some flowers for your garden. So I was thinking about it, and you want something, I'm just going to recommend three flowers. And you want something early in the year, in the middle of the summer, and then also in the fall. And these flowers that I'm going to recommend, they don't get too tall. They also are super versatile. They can do sun or partial shade, and they're not that picky about soil moisture either. So first off, oh, and they're also very robust. So like they're good at spreading and filling in space, but they're not what I would call aggressive plants. So first off, golden alexanders. It's going to bloom in the springtime with these really pretty lace-like yellow flowers, and it's a very important pollen and nectar source for springtime pollinators. In the middle of summer, I would recommend clustered mountain mint. This one doesn't have showy flowers, but it does have this really pretty silvery foliage. So it makes everything else in your garden look nicer. And it is a total pollinator magnet. The Penn State University, their master gardeners did this study looking at pollinator visitation to a bunch of different plants. And this one had the highest marks of all. And it blooms for a really long time. Okay, and then finally, in the fall, one of my favorites is heart-leaved aster. This is a really pretty pale blue flower. It does very well in shady spots, but you could also plant it in the sun. And yeah, it's just a wonderful, the asters are some of the best plants for butterflies and also for, lots of pollinators in the fall. And you can see an American lady here visiting heart-leaved aster. So that's the last thing I wanted to say, except for please come to Meadow City. We're going to be reopening in May. We're very easy to get to. We're right next to the highway exit at East 152nd on I-90. So it's on the east side, but it's not that far at all from the west side. And the way we have the plants arranged in the nursery, they go from early bloomers at one end to late bloomers at the other. So you can walk down the aisles and kind of pick out plants that are going to be blooming in succession. And we have them divided into different sections according to like plants that do well in wet places, plants that like drier places, plants that can grow in the shade. So yeah, we would love it if you came by. But thank you so much for having me as a speaker. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take those questions.
Thank you so much, Dave, and thank you everyone for listening and watching. Um, if you do have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat. It looks like we have a couple that have already rolled in. Um, I personally really enjoyed learning about the replacing, instead of mulch, leaf litter. I know that that's so important and beneficial for many insects that overwinter on the leaves, but I think it was a great reminder. And I also loved the photos of the brushfoot family butterflies. Those were
Oh
beautiful.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
haven't seen those.
yeah, it's I love their it's just remarkable, that when it opens its wings, it goes from, being like a leaf to a just a beautiful, beautiful butterfly.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see here. I'll go ahead
Okay.
and
Thank you. Yeah.
scroll
So
down.
one
Oh, go
question
ahead.
about habitat. Sorry if that's okay. I can just read it.
No,
But if you
please
would rather
do.
take
Oh,
over,
no,
you
no, no, I would rather that you do it.
Okay. So for the flats, how would
Yeah.
you leave bare soil? Isn't it difficult to manage like the plants and weeds that might move in? Do you have
Yeah,
any
that's a
tips?
good point. I think that uh you might find that there's just a spot in your garden where plants don't, where they seem to struggle and they just aren't filling in. So you might just want to consider, like, rather than selecting the plants that would thrive in that spot, maybe just leave that spot bare. Also, you could maintain it by just doing some occasional weeding. And I'm not really talking about a big area of the garden. Maybe just like a few square feet or something like that, or like a square yard. That would be sufficient.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, it sounds like everyone should do as much as they can, I guess, within their property. You might not have
Oh,
space for
the
all of these.
the other thing is, it doesn't have to be totally bare.
Mhm.
Like, if you keep the plants in a certain spot cut really low, there's going to be plenty of visible bare soil in between them. And like really patchy lawns where the lawn's not growing very well, those will be a nesting site for ground nesting bees the same way as a bare spot in a garden. So I would say maybe just in a patch of your garden, keep the plants trimmed super low, like at ground level, and that would be good enough.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. A similar question. How do you have any tips for how do you create and manage a brush pile in a smaller yard without upsetting any neighbors?
Oh yeah, it's a great question because it's like, we know we're doing what's best for. I mean, we know we're right and we're doing the right thing with all of this stuff. But neighbors, whatever, you got to keep them happy. So yeah, I would say the brush pile, it doesn't have to be like right in the middle of your garden. I think that lots of these butterflies and birds, certainly, they disperse pretty far looking for a habitat feature like that. So uh yeah, I mean, you could put it maybe, like, I don't know, near the back fence of your yard, in your yard or something like that. And I think that it would still be accessible, to those organisms that are going to be using it.
Awesome. Another question. Do you know about deer tolerance with the three plants that you recommended? Which thank you very much for including those, by the way.
Yeah, of course. Okay, great question. Well, I'll tell you that definitely the clustered mountain mint is super deer resistant. I'll just give you a pointer. Any plant where when you crack the leaf, it's aromatic, deer aren't going to like it. It's like they like bland food or something. But anyway, yeah, so the mountain mint is great in terms of that. I would also say that the golden Alexander's seems to be pretty good too. I don't have as much experience with that plant, but I do think the deer tend to avoid it. Probably not to the same extent as the mountain mint. The heartleaf aster, though, that one is going to get targeted. So, yeah, the deer are going to browse that one down. So, one strategy is, if you want to have a plant like that in your garden, uh, mix it, like plant it in the same space as a deer repellent plant. So maybe plant some heartleaf aster right next to some mountain mint or wild bergamot or something. And that's a good way. The deer will just like stay away from that patch.
Gotcha. Yeah, someone in the chat mentioned how the deer have trimmed their asters in the spring last year, but
Yeah.
they
Oh
still
yeah,
bloomed back even more full force in fall.
oh that's good. I mean, they're super resilient, but unfortunately, the asters do get targeted by deer.
Yeah, yeah. I believe someone also mentioned rabbit tolerance. She's been trying to populate asters, but the rabbits keep eating them. She's put a fence around them. Would you say similar recommendations like
I think so.
species? Yeah.
I don't. There's not as much like specific information about rabbit. Like preventing rabbits from browsing.
Yeah.
But I think that in general, the plants are going to be most vulnerable to rabbits when they're small. So I think that if you can protect the plant during that initial growth period, once it's bigger, the rabbits are probably not going to bother it. Another thing is that I have this garden on my tree lawn, and I put one of those short wire fences. It has like kind of an arching wire fence. It's cheap. You can get it at the hardware store. I put that around the whole garden. Rabbits can't get in there. Like they don't jump very high. So like if you put like a low fence around your garden like that, you're not going to have any trouble from rabbits.
That's a great idea. I've also heard for anyone who might be worrying about deer as well. I've seen people put the motion sensor sprinklers in and then they'll go off and
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I think that is a great suggestion. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Um, I I've heard the same exact thing. Like they seem to be very useful.
Though we still recommend you being cautious about your water use, of course, in your yards. But another question we have, if you could just explain a little bit more about kind of cleaning up gardens and cutting stems, because a lot of people are under the impression that it's okay to wait till later spring to do your cleanup and cutting.
Oh yeah. So like the only reason that I said the reason why I recommend cutting a few stems in early spring is because there are like you want to have those stems already cut at the time that the first bees emerge, because it's when they first emerge, that's when they're going to be looking for those nesting sites. So it's good if, like, working from your garden edge, if you at least trim a few of your plants, and that will give them what they need. But then, like, yeah, that was really all I was saying with the early spring suggestion, because it's totally true. You've got those overwintering organisms hibernating in your garden probably until like at least mid-April. So like you don't want to go plodding through your garden during that time. So I would say, yeah, for like trimming some stems early in the year, just trim a few from the edge of your garden. And also, yeah, really just the whole philosophy should be that we don't want to like disturb the garden too much. We kind of want to minimize walking and that kind of thing in the garden year round. Because there's really no time of year when these organisms aren't using the leaf litter and when they're not using, the earth itself for nesting. They are going through those life cycles constantly. So just try to minimize disturbing your garden as much as possible.
Of course. Thank you. Um, I don't see any more questions currently, just a bunch of thank yous for your content and talk. Um, I know you already spoke a little bit about Meadow City, and what you guys do, but I was wondering if you could just include a brief little pitch about that like restoration you're doing and how you collect seeds from local, like
Oh
local.
yeah. So I mean, we're not doing any specific habitat restoration ourselves, but we do supply plants, to gardeners and other organizations that would, be undertaking restoration projects. And we, but we have recently acquired an adjacent property. And this is like along the on-ramp right to 90, right near our nursery. And this is going to be a spot where we're growing trees and shrubs, in addition to the flowers that we currently grow. And oh yeah, so the other thing is all of the plants, well, almost all the plants in our nursery are what's called local ecotype. So they're grown from seed collected in Northeast Ohio from naturally occurring populations. So these plants are the actual descendants of plants that have been growing in this region for thousands of years. So they're meant to be here in terms of the growing conditions and the interrelationships that they have with other organisms. But collecting that seed every year, that's a big job for my friend Julie, who kind of is in charge of the nursery. So part of what we're going to do with our new land is we're going to have seed production plots. So using that seed from those naturally occurring populations, we'll be growing some patches of plants on site to provide us some of that seed so we don't need to go out into the field to collect it.
Thank you for touching on that. I just think that's such a cool project, and I think it's great that people can have plants specifically adapted to this region in their yard
Yeah.
if they so choose.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Okay. So again, thank you everyone. Thank you, Dave. And I will be following up with both a little survey for this webinar as well as a link to the recording once we get it posted in case you want to review it or for anyone who couldn't attend. If you do have any questions, please feel free to email me. I will drop my little email in the chat right now. Um, Other than that, Dave, if you would mind sharing your slides with me, that'd
Oh,
be
I
great.
don't.
If you guys are not able to, I understand.
No, I can share them with you.
Okay, then I'll hopefully include these slides so that everyone can also refer back to the presentation itself. Thank you so
Sounds good.
much. All right. Thank you again also, since it's such a lovely day, for being on the webinar. Go out and enjoy it if you can.
Thanks,
Enjoy the
Maggie.
rest of your week. Thank you, Dave. Thank you,
All righty.
everyone. Take care.